Welcome to Her Path, the podcast for busy women looking for purpose, health, and happiness. Today we're diving into a topic that touches many of us. It's called people pleasing. And it's something that's ingrained in us early in life, and yet it can become so detrimental to our emotional health, our mental health, and our physical health. We're going to explore what it really means, why it happens, and most importantly, how to overcome it. So let's begin by understanding what people pleasing really is and why many of us fall into this pattern. People pleasing is essentially the act of putting the needs, desires, and expectations of others before your own, often at the expense of your own well-being. And for many of us, it starts as a survival mechanism. It's a way to secure love, validation, or safety. And here's the kicker: it often feels like the right thing to do because culturally, we're taught that being selfless is good and being selfish is bad. And people pleasing can also be a trauma response because it's not a natural way of being. It's something we do to adapt to environments where we feel emotionally unsafe. It could be due to growing up in a home that with emotionally unavailable or even narcissistic parents. Or it could stem from trauma we experience in relationships, work, or in school life. And people pleasers often struggle to set boundaries. They struggle to say no. They struggle to express their true thoughts and emotions because they fear conflict or rejection. And over time, this creates deep internal conflict where the person feels exhausted, resentful, or disconnected from their own needs. Does this sound familiar to any of you? I know it hits deeply within me.
Yeah, I was, as a kid, mostly because I didn't want mom. Mom was very explosive and very, very harsh, disciplining. And so that's where it came from, is just trying to make things right, not do anything wrong, make mom happy so that, I wouldn't get in trouble or yelled at for anything at school, doing everything right so that, the teachers wouldn't be upset, wouldn't have a need to call home to cause trouble with, peers at school, being super friendly, super agreeable all the time so that no one would say anything negative or, talk badly behind your back. And I learned that over time, I lost my voice. I didn't have a voice. It was an echo of what everyone else wanted and what made everyone else happy. And it took me some time when it became very detrimental and it was really holding me back. And it was kind of around the time when I left for college when that just had to stop. And I had to put myself first in order for me to be able to move forward. There was a point when I almost didn't go to college because I was just so worried about the situation in my house, about my siblings, what was going to happen to them, what was going to happen to mom, what's going to happen to my dad. If I'm not here, I felt responsible, like I was the glue that was holding anything together. But I had a very important role model who at that time said, look, you have to put yourself first. You have to think about yourself first. It's not a selfish thing to put yourself first. The better situation you are in, the more you will be able to help others in the future. And so that was like a switch, something that changed, that really taught me to start thinking about putting myself first, and that I wasn't in control of what anyone else thought, how anyone else reacted, or what they did in their lives. They were responsible for their own actions, and I had to be responsible for my own. Luckily, I learned that at a young age, and it wasn't like an automatic from one day to the next. I was a completely different person, but it gave me some much needed perspective that I had been able to hold on to be able to have a quality of life.
You got that message really early in life. That's amazing. Really early. How about you, Elise? Anything to add?
Yeah, I think that my where my people pleasing came from was more about keeping the peace, wanting everyone to be happy, not wanting conflict, not wanting disagreement, and finding that being a people pleaser could help keep the calm. And I came from um a very loving family, a very calm family. There were no raised voices, a very academic family, but my ability to people please to keep the peace became my go-to, like just never wanting conflict. And I realized that in my young adult age, when it became clear to me that I didn't really know who I was and what I stood for, and I wasn't showing up as my authentic self, that I was, giving into what other people wanted, or going with the flow. And it's taken a long time, and I'm still learning how to show up authentically, how to have the courage to not cause a conflict, but stand in my own space, even if it means conflict or discomfort. So I think there's so many different ways to be a people pleaser. I think Gabby, yours and mine are so different. Nancy, I know your story too. And there's so many ways to do it, but finding our authentic selves and finding our voice. And I know we've had past, podcasts about finding your voice and speaking your truth, but I think this is one of those root causes.
Right, for sure.
And I'm a recovering people pleaser. I do have relapses, but it's okay because I'm in a 12-step program. No, I just having some fun, but I feel like my people pleasing definitely stemmed from wanting people to like me and wanting to control what other people thought of me. And something that was so freeing for me was learning that I can't control what other people think by my actions.
Mm.
And if I like what I'm doing, then that's okay. But if I'm doing it to get approval from somebody else, to question that, like question my motive. And something that's been, we talk about it a lot, especially in end of life care and being in a caregiver role. I'm a natural giver. And it is easy to give and give and give and give until you have nothing left to give. But they, are always encouraging us to fill your own cup, which is putting yourself first, but fill your own cup because you cannot give from an empty cup. And I'm not really sure where this idea of filling your own cup, whatever that looks like for you, is being selfish. But that is just, I've heard that from so many people, that self-care is selfish, or worrying that self-care is selfish, and taking time for yourself, or drawing boundaries and saying no. And what I have found is the opposite. Saying no and having boundaries and doing what I need to do for myself to fill my cup, I then have more energy to be able to give more. So, but it's a work in progress, and I think lifelong for sure. Definitely, Nancy, when you said unemotional parents and narcissistic, I was like, all right, that makes sense.
Sure, that's me.
Yeah.
Yeah. My parents divorced when I was like 5, and so I would always go in between both of them, and just trying to, be the one that would always fix everything. Yeah, so it wasn't healthy for me to grow up like that, but hey, whatever it is, it is. But anyway, one thing that people don't recognize about people pleasing, and this really triggered me when I heard about it, is it can actually be a form of manipulation. Because while people pleasing seems selfless, it can also be a subconscious way to control how people perceive us. So when we people please, we're essentially trying to manipulate someone else's response, whether it's their approval, their affection, or their validation, by doing or saying what we think they want to hear. And I'm so guilty of that. So we're not being authentic. Instead, we're shaping ourselves to fit what we believe will make other people happy. And at the end of the day, this isn't true connection. It's a way of securing our safety or acceptance by hiding parts of who we are. And it leads to long-term resentment. When we mold ourselves to avoid conflict or rejection, we reinforce unhealthy dynamics, both in relationships and in our brains. And have you guys heard of fawning, like fight, flight, freeze, fawn?
Tell me
Fawn-
what that is. I have, but it doesn't make sense to me.
Fawning is it's closely related to people pleasing. It's a term coined by a therapist named Pete Walker. It's part of the fight, flight, freeze, fawn trauma response.
Mhm.
So when we fawn, we try to avoid conflict or danger by excessively accommodating other people. It's the ultimate form of self-betrayal because it requires us to suppress who we are in order to gain approval or avoid negative outcomes. And they say it comes from childhood, particularly in environments where we didn't feel safe. So if you grew up with parents who were overly critical, neglectful, or controlling, you may have learned that the best way to protect yourself was to please them by doing whatever you could to avoid their anger or disapproval. So when you're in a fawn response, you might agree with things you don't actually agree with. You might say yes to things you don't want to do or tolerate behavior that crosses your boundaries. And over time, obviously, it chips away at our sense of self.
Now, I will say there may be some instances when fawning is appropriate. And I just thought about trying to put my 7-year-old to sleep when she makes demands that I know full well I'm not going to follow through with. If I go to sleep right now, will we go to Disneyland tomorrow? Yes, honey, whatever you want. Anything you want. We'll go to Disneyland tomorrow and I get to bed. And you promise I can have some ice cream tomorrow? Oh, yes, I'm going to give you the biggest bowl of ice cream you've ever seen. So yes, 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 go to bed. So just FYI, there may be some instances when, we may want to do a little bit of people pleasing for that positive gain. And I don't think any harm was done at the end of the day.
No,
And she remembered that I promised it, but I would just have to say, I didn't remember. I didn't say that. You must have been half asleep when I said it.
Funny. They don't forget, do they?
Or my husband, I promise I won't have a headache tomorrow. I promise I'll be in the mood tomorrow.
Right.
Make all your dreams come true tomorrow. Not today.
So the irony is that people pleasing, it's an attempt to create harmony, but it also leads to more internal chaos. So when you realize that it's not about being nice, but it's also about trying to control outcomes, you can see the importance of shifting away from the pattern. Because real connection and peace come from being authentically yourself, not from manipulating situations or people to feel safe. So how does it impact our health? Well, it's not only emotionally draining, but it can lead to physical consequences. Because when we suppress our true selves to meet the expectations of others, we engage in chronic stress, and the stress releases cortisol and other hormones that wreak havoc on your body. So people can have symptoms like insomnia, fatigue, or frequent illnesses. Over time, it can lead to chronic conditions like autoimmune issues, digestive issues, and heart disease. And I see this in women I work with, those who've spent decades putting everyone else first. Eventually, they find themselves physically and emotionally absolutely tapped out. But it's good to notice the importance of neuroplasticity, our brain's ability to change and heal. So even though people pleasing can feel like it's wired into us, the good news is we've got the power to rewire our brains through intentional thought patterns and new behaviors. So it's not about fixing yourself, but rather reclaiming your mind and body from conditioned responses. So how do you begin to break free from people pleasing? Well, like Gabby, you have a good mentor who kind of instills in you the need to do your own thing, but you start by becoming aware of your patterns by asking yourself, where do I say yes when I really mean no? Maybe in what situations do I feel like I have to be someone that I'm not? maybe asking what relationships leave me feeling anxious or drained. But awareness is always the first step. And once you recognize the patterns, you can start the process of reprogramming your own response. In coaching, we call it mind management, the idea that we can actively shape our thoughts and create new neural pathways. And it can be as simple as practicing saying no without feeling guilty, which is interesting, or setting small boundaries to protect your energy. And one thing I like using with my clients is something called the pause. So when you're in a situation where you're about to default to people pleasing, you just kind of pause, have a moment, take a breath, and say, am I doing this because I truly want to or because I feel obligated? And just this moment of reflection can create the space you need to make a different choice. And another piece is self-compassion, because people pleasers tend to be hard on themselves, always striving for perfection or validation. Learning to give yourself grace, allowing imperfection can be revolutionary. We know that healing is not linear and it's okay to take small incremental steps. So ultimately, breaking free from people pleasing is about reclaiming your authentic self. When you stop pretending, suppressing, or fawning, your nervous system can actually let go and relax, and you open up to more creativity, more connection. It's not selfish to put yourself first because it's essential. When you start setting boundaries and honoring your needs, you'll find that relationships that are meant to be in your life are there, and the ones that don't, well, maybe it's time to reevaluate them. So anything else, you guys?
You know, I want to talk a little bit more about breaking that cycle of people pleasing, because I think that that is it's so hard, but it's so important. And, you know, when I'm coaching my clients who are constantly putting everyone ahead of their own needs, it's a really hard pill to swallow to start to think about prioritizing yourself. And society does not smile at that, right? Society expects women to be people pleasers to some degree.
Because
And when I say that,
we were raised to be the good girl.
yes, we were raised to be the good girl. And when I challenge that with my clients, there's a lot of emotion that comes up. There's a lot of resistance, but then there's also I truly don't know how to do this, because it's people pleasing is around me. It's how I was raised. It's what's in the media. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
So I guess I want to explore a little bit. How do we break that? I don't know if it's a stigma or it's a cycle of people pleasing. How do we create an environment and a society where it's okay to prioritize ourselves and be our authentic selves?
I think it's so being aware of when you're people pleasing, first of all, knowing kind of when it came in and why it came in, and that, it totally is something that came in as a protection device. So being compassionate with yourself. And beginning to say no without an excuse. Just say no or no, thank you. No, not like, no, I can't because blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, no, thank you is a nice first step to do. And recognizing like, okay, I feel like saying yes when I want to say no, but it's that incongruency in the body that is not healthy. So
Yeah.
just being aware of when you're in, I think being aware is huge, because then, maybe the next time or the time after that, you'll actually do it and say no.
Yeah, I like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And piggybacking on that insight. And I see this when people or when I complain about something that I agreed to. I'm complaining, feeling frustrated, feeling overwhelmed, feeling negatively about something that I was asked to do or something that I chose to do because I was wanting to look good. I was wanting to make myself appear a certain way to the community or to the PTA group or to this committee, and it wasn't something that really brought me joy. it wasn't something that I was authentically really joyful, committed, feeling good about doing, regardless of the time commitment, regardless of the work it would take, regardless of how hard it would be, complaining and blaming everybody else, when this is something that I chose to do, but the intention behind it was to have the appearance of, or to have the perception, or to not, let me change that, rephrase it, to have everyone like me, so that I look like, you know, the good mother, the good doctor, the good community leader, to make them have that perception, which in a sense is to people please, not because I really wanted to do it, not because I felt my heart was 100% in it. And acknowledging that, having that insight over time, then will allow you to break that cycle. When you notice the things that you are feeling negatively about, that are overwhelming you, that are complaining you, are things that you have the choice to continue to embark on or not.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
But it can be muddy and foggy because of the expectations out there. But sometimes it's going against those expectations and really being true to yourself. That is where the magic comes. And that is the scariest thing.
That is. Or if
Yeah.
you're
Just this past week, or maybe I've had 2 requests to be a director of something. I'm sorry, I am unable to do it. And
Right.
I don't even give a reason. I just don't want to. I may have time.
I think I
I
don't
just
want
don't want to. I just don't want to.
I think a byproduct of that too is like building self-confidence. The more you practice saying no with unapologetically and without excuse, putting up boundaries and questioning your motives behind doing something before you do it.
Yeah.
Volunteer for this committee? No. Well, it's really important to the kids. Yeah, but I don't want to.
I love
Come
to,
watch this event. I don't want to go to that track meet. I'm sorry. It's too early. I want to sleep. Everybody was fine. Nobody died. Nobody felt, you know.
That's hilarious.
one of the questions that I love to ask my clients when we're talking about releasing the people pleaser, right, is to say, what is the worst that could happen?
Right.
And that question catches clients off guard. So what? Let's go there.
So
What is the worst thing that could happen?
Mm-hmm.
And they'll come up with something, and I will just say, and so what?
right?
And it's so disarming. So I would give that to our listeners as kind of a self-coaching opportunity, you know, as you start to get into this swirl of I have to people please. To your point, Gabby, I don't want to do it. I don't want to be on this kid committee. I don't want to do it. What's the worst that will happen? And so what? It's never as bad as we make it out. When we have to actually start putting those pieces together, when you ask that question, you have to speak the truth, and it's always more benign than our thoughts.
100%. Awesome. So to everyone listening, I encourage you to take this journey of self-discovery. It's time to move away from people-pleasing and fawning and step into a life that feels authentic and aligned. Remember, you're worthy of love, care, and respect without having to earn it by sacrificing yourself. So if this topic resonates with you, I invite you to take one small step today towards reclaiming your true self, whether it's saying no to something that doesn't serve you or setting a boundary with someone. Remember that healing starts with intention. Until next time, take care of yourself and remember you're worthy of living life on your terms. And as always, if you found this to be helpful, give us a like. Take care. Bye-bye.
Hey, one more thing before we leave. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. We are certified professional coaches, but this broadcast is not a substitute for medical or psychological advice. Okay, thanks for listening. See you next week.